So the starting point for the Sphinx must have been a huge rock sticking out of the surface of the Giza Plateau. Workers cut a trench around it, quarrying the stone out from the ditch in huge blocks. They hauled off those blocks to build the nearby Sphinx temple. Then, sculptors carved the giant rock remaining in the center into the shape of the Sphinx.
The Sphinx was carved right out of the natural mother rock of the Giza Plateau.
But knowing that it's carved right out of the earth is only half the mystery. How did they actually do it? Sculpting a human-headed lion out of 20,000 tons of limestone is no small matter.
So, Fatih, we need to get two types of rock, two types of hara.
To investigate the challenges faced by the ancient sculptors, archaeologist Richard Redding and Fahi Mohammed, a stonemason who has worked at Giza since he was a boy, team up to carve a mini Sphinx.
So let's see what we can find here. And see
They search for limestone that's as hard as the layer in the Sphinx's head.
I think we've got it right here. What you can see is this one's nice and strong. It's like the head.
Okay. Hop. Yallah.
They find just the right stone in a nearby quarry. It's extremely heavy and hard, maybe too hard.
Mr. Richard, my tools will be ruined.
Fahi is worried that the hard rock will ruin his tools.
My tools made of steel, but the rock bent it. The rock is very hard.
Okay.
If Fahi is having such a difficult time using modern steel tools, how did the ancient Egyptians carve the Sphinx with more primitive tools? The answer will come half a world away.
Hey, Rick. New England in the fall's a far cry from Egypt in the desert.
Mark Lehner has come to consult with Rick Brown, a specialist in ancient tools. Based on actual copper tools found at Giza and tomb scenes depicting stonecutters at work, Brown gathers everything an ancient Egyptian would have had to carve the Great Sphinx.
Rick and I got together and looked at all the evidence we have from the tomb scenes, from actual tools that we found, and based on all this evidence, Rick has put together the rudiments of the toolkit that the Sphinx builders would have used.
So we have copper chisels, two-handed pounder, and there's the hammer.
To really understand the challenge of using these tools for carving, Lehner and Brown begin by making them, starting with the copper chisel.
Even a little more right now, just so we can get some good heat.
Working long before the invention of harder bronze or iron, the Sphinx sculptors had to make do with softer copper.
This is what they would have done in Egypt. They take a blank of copper, we're going to heat it, and we're going to fashion this into a chisel.
The pure copper starts out a metal gray, and as it heats, it turns red.
So you want that piece of copper red hot?
Yeah, when I get color in the copper. Okay, we're ready. Okay, it looks good.
Ooh, we got it red hot.
It looks good. Now I'm going to just hand this off to you.
The heat softens the copper into a more pliable material that can be pounded into shape.
You know, this process is so basic. What they were doing was they were using a hard material to fashion and shape a soft material.
But as the soft copper cools, it hardens again.
I want to go back in the fire because I can actually break the metal. Okay. So let's go back in the fire.
Already, these ancient tools reveal there's more to making the Sphinx than just carving.
Charcoal was a crucial ingredient of making these monuments at Giza. So that they must have been trucking wood in and feeding these fires all day long, all year round, just to make the tools to make the monument.
Now I want to have it flattened down this time.
The heating pounding cycle is repeated over and over.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's go.
Until the shape is just right.
I want it to be straight along the axis like this, because if it's already turning a little bit, that means it's not going to last as long.
That's right.
So just slightly.
They must have amassed more copper for building the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx than just about any place in the world in the 3rd millennium BC. I mean, it just must have been a huge cost in copper.
But the copper chisel was the high-tech finishing tool of the Old Kingdom. The real grunt work was achieved with something much more basic: stone hammers.
Mark, if you look at this photograph of the Tomb of Ti, there is a stone carver using a tool like this. And this is what I discovered. You have to really look carefully at these drawings because they give a lot of information.
Based on this 4,000-year-old tomb painting, Brown and Lehner make their own hammers today.
I want to use a harder stone against a softer stone.
So you're using a stone to make a stone
Exactly.
tool. There's a whole lot of pounding going on.
The grooves and lashing transform a simple stone into an effective hammer.
It's not easy, is it? They probably did it as quickly as tying a shoe.
Okay, let's try that.
The thing about this is, I think the critical thing is it gives you a lot more action.
He can work like that for many, many hours and not wear himself out.
Now, Lehner and Brown will put the tools to the test. They're going to attempt to carve the feature of the Sphinx that's most conspicuously absent: the nose. There are stories that it was shot off by Napoleon's soldiers using it for target practice. But they turn out to be false.
About 300 years before Napoleon, an Arab historian already mentions that the nose is gone. I think there's good evidence that it was snapped off intentionally. There's a deep wedge down the bridge, and there's another groove in the Sphinx's left nostril. I think somebody might have pounded these metal wedges and then it snapped it off to the south.
While the original nose is lost forever, today Lehner and Brown, with just stone hammers and copper chisels, will carve a new one.
Let's go to work.
I'm just using graphite.
Out of this 6-foot chunk of hard limestone, they will attempt to carve a nose nearly half the size of the original.
We're gonna make this nose starting with tools like this.
Those tools.
Was that my idea?
Yes.
They dive in and quickly discover that hard stone is much more effective than the soft copper in these early stages.
That's the evidence that the pounder, even though it seems primitive, is actually quite effective.
But even with reinforcements and after hours of pounding, they barely made a dent. Will Lehner and Brown really be able to carve a nose with these ancient tools? Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, is the official guardian of the Sphinx. He has searched this colossal cat from head to toe for clues to how it was built. He knows from the geology that it was carved right out of the earth. So why does the bottom appear to be built out of stone blocks, like the pyramids? Hawass investigates the size and style of the blocks for answers.
If you look at the two poles of the Sphinx, this is a typical small stones that the Roman in 30 BC came and they did add this to the Sphinx.
Just between the Sphinx's paws, Zahi Hawass finds blocks from 4 different periods.
This is 30 BC, 1550 BC, and this is 2600 BC.
Hawass concludes that Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans have been covering the Sphinx in blocks for thousands of years. But why? The answer can be found in a deadly hidden force attacking the limestone of the body of the Sphinx and the surrounding ditch.
All of this was once the floor of a sea. It was a seabed 50 million years ago, so it's naturally full of salt.
When groundwater rises, it seeps through the rock drawing the salt to the surface, where it crystallizes and expands. The results are disastrous for the Sphinx.
I hate to do this, but it's happening naturally all the time on this wall next to the Sphinx. The flakes fall and crumble. This is what was happening to the Sphinx body. It's this process that results in literally Sphinx dust.
Amazingly, from the day it was built, the body of the Sphinx has been turning to dust. The blocks put there by Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans were to protect and conceal its deteriorating body, especially the more vulnerable parts carved from soft limestone. But while the soft stone is bad news for the Sphinx, it's good news for sculptor Fahy, because it's much easier to work with as he carves his mini Sphinx.
Now I am working on the foot of the back leg. I am sculpting the paw and the thigh.
He makes quick progress because the stone is so soft. But now comes the hard part. Fahy reluctantly returns to the head, which, like the original Sphinx, is made of much harder limestone. Striking this harder rock, his chisel is far less effective, and progress slows dramatically, even with the advantage of his modern steel tools. So how are Lehner and Brown progressing back in New England with their ancient copper tools? After days of work, their copper chisels and stone pounders are barely making a dent. At this pace, it's unlikely they're going to carve a nose out of this rock anytime soon. Unless Brown and his team resort to taking some shortcuts.
Well, I guess you caught us. We worked on the stone for a long time using the Egyptian tools, and then decided that we'd move to the modern tools. It's a lot faster.
Granted, the power tools are a lot faster than the ancient tools, but surprisingly, the basic carving process hasn't changed much since ancient times.
What the Egyptians would do is they would make these channels, these parallel channels. Then you come back with a flat chisel and blast out all that material in between.
But while Brown's pneumatic chisel has a carbide tip hammering at 2,000 hits per minute, the copper chisel the ancient Egyptians would have used lasts only a few dozen strikes.
You see, after I've only gone about the equivalent of maybe 10 centimeters, my tool's already almost useless. Each time the tool gets dull, we have to come back and reheat. When we reheat, it softens the metal, and then we can reshape it.
Brown is wearing down tools at an extraordinary rate. For efficiency, he moves his forge closer to the carving.
We brought our forge down here closer to the stone because we're just blowing through the copper chisels so fast, it gives us the opportunity to use them, dull them, sharpen them, and go right back to work, which is probably like they did in Egyptian times.
Brown is discovering it's taking a lot of time and a great number of copper tools, and his stone shows little evidence of progress. It's hard to imagine this hunk of rock will ever be a finished nose, even one nearly half the size of what was originally on the Sphinx. It's even harder to imagine carving the Great Sphinx as big as a football field. Clearly, only a pharaoh could pull this off. The question is, which one? The location of the Sphinx undoubtedly links it to the pyramids. Whoever built the pyramids likely built the Sphinx. The problem is, the Sphinx appears to sit right between two pyramids built by two different pharaohs. The first and largest pyramid was built by Pharaoh Khufu, who reigned around 2500 BC. His son, Khafre, built the second, slightly smaller pyramid. Rainer Stadelmann, a leading Egyptologist, believes the head of the Sphinx represents the pharaoh who built it.